All right, Marcia, very good evening to you and to your listeners, as well as to Miss McLean. Yeah, I was able to listen towards the end, and it was very interesting because, and I'm glad that some light is being brought to what's going on in Dominica. As Miss Weeks was right has rightly stated, Skerritt has been able to maintain himself in office not because he's loved or liked or voted overwhelmingly by the population, but he has depended on a loophole in our process where we have a voters list that exceeds our population. Our population is roughly 70,000. Our voters list is approaching 75,000 people. So what he's been able to do very successfully is been able to reach out to the diaspora and bring people in selected constituencies where the margins are razor thin. So, for example, in the 2005 election, there were three constituencies that he won by 1, 2, and 5 votes, respectively. So, three constituencies he won by a total of 8 votes. And and even in those constituencies, he brought in a significant number of persons from the diaspora. So, that has been his modus operandi to maintain himself in office, something we have been fighting very, very hard. And it's interesting to hear refer to him as a monarchy because it does appear that he's really keen on not having any opposition. I mean, he's tried his best to jail his opponents. For example, I've been before the courts. I've been jailed no more than 3 times. I've spent at least 4 days in jail. For just having a simple protest action. And more recently, in March of 2019, myself, along with 25 other individuals, were arrested. This time, I did not spend time in jail, but several of those who were arrested spent several days in jail. And we are before the courts still for that. So that's how he's been able to maintain it. So I concur fully with Ms. Wicks that is the way he's been able to maintain himself in office. And that's the reason why we have been fighting for electoral reform. We did get a limited amount of reform to the extent that we're talking about a confirmation process that is due to start in October, in this month, on the 15th of this month. The hope is that the number of persons who are overseas will not be able to confirm because according to the legislation, you have to be in Dominica to confirm your name on the list. So individuals would have to come to Dominica. But we've had a lot of what we call hanky panky, a lot of irregularities, even in the registration of persons who live overseas. So I'm not even very comfortable or confident that persons will remain on those lists who otherwise would not have come physically into Dominica. That's a big concern that we have because we have persons who have been registered who never set foot in Dominica. But because their parents supported the government and they overseas, then they were just inserted on the list in Dominica, and then they were brought down to vote. I had individuals in my constituency, 2 individuals who told me that they were surprised when they called on them to vote because they knew that they had never registered in Dominica. Yet their names had appeared on the list. So we have all of that evidence, and that's the process by which this prime minister has been able to perpetuate his stay in office since, correctly, as the caller said, from January of 2004. Yes, well, we are still awaiting the prime minister to address the nation on this and to give full details. He did speak a little bit to it at a press conference last week. But nothing substantive in terms of what really the benefits are, the rationale for it, and why it was done. And so that has left a lot of room for speculation and a lot of room for suspicions as to what exactly that is all about. And I suspect that, as was being pointed out, that sounds like there is some element of getting to this vote. For example, in Dominica, you don't need to be a citizen, but a Commonwealth individual, which means practically all of our CARICOM neighbors. If they spend a period of 12 months, they can in fact vote. They can be registered to vote. And so if you have persons coming into Dominica, they can be brought in there. The same way as we've seen in terms of the irregularities The same way we have seen persons from Dominica who've been registered, who have not been there physically, but have been somehow found their names on the list. Is the same way we could, I suspect we could find individuals who have just been in Dominica, maybe not for the 12 months, but who find themselves on the list and who may be given some incentive or the other to vote for this government. And also,
Mhm.
even in the case of Barbados, there is a likelihood that the government will benefit the most out of any move like this. Because if, for example, in Barbados now, instead of having to wait a few years, you can now get your papers in 6 months, there'd be a tendency to favor the government that allows you that privilege. And
Mhm.
so it's very sinister, and a lot of questions have been asked as to why now, why the haste, why is it not being explained to the public? What are the tangible benefits? I mean, let's face it, the freedom of movement works very well in a situation where you have a fully developed economic union, as, for
Mhm.
example, the European
Yeah.
Union, right?
Mhm.
There are sets of laws that govern that kind of movement. It is equal between countries. Countries wanting to join, they have certain criteria that they must meet. So it's well set out. What we have is a very haphazard stringing together of countries which, by the way, are not on the same wavelength as it relates to their economies. The
Mhm.
Barbadian economy is certainly superior to that of Dominica and St. Vincent, even Belize. So that leaves a lot of question as to what exactly there is in it for the Barbadian government, for the Dominican government, and St. Vincent and Belize. So it does appear that there is that coming together of like-minded individuals who may very well have some ulterior motives, and I think it's only fair that the people continue to question what are the motives behind this, and really it is something to ultimately benefit all of those populations, or rather something to benefit those who may be in office.
A bloated voters list and padded voters list, allegedly, in Dominica. What would you say to Barbadians? Should there be any concern to
Yes.
Barbados? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I think, because the integrity of the voting process relies on the integrity of the voters list. And
Mm-hmm.
if that is in any way corrupted, then it opens up for all sorts of manipulation. And we've seen it in Dominica, because under the original rules we had in Dominica, you had to have been within the jurisdiction for at least 3 months within the voting period to be able to vote. However, if your name is not removed by the authorities and it remains on the list, you can, on that basis, vote. And it's on that's how they have been able to bring in persons all the time in marginal constituencies, persons who are residing overseas for 20, in some cases 40 years, come back and take part in a process where they clearly should not be involved in. So it's
Mm-hmm.
something that is quite concerning. And also you wonder why it is that way, because a lot of those names could be cleansed. Like, for example, persons who have been pronounced dead, who have been issued a death certificate, automatically those names should be removed from the voters list. There's no reason why those names should continue to be on there. Because in addition to bringing persons in the marginal constituencies, what we've also had, because we had no voter ID, which is different in Barbados, but we had no voter ID. So it was very easy to bring someone in who claims to have
Mm-hmm.
been away for 30 years. The person at the polling station would not necessarily know this individual. So anybody could come and claim that they're Thomson, Fontaine wanted to vote in that constituency. And we had a lot of that happening. So it opens up for all sorts of irregularities, all manner of fraud. And it's something that the authorities really should pay closer attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's conspiracy theory.
No, well, this video has gone viral here in Dominica. I got it at
Oh.
least 10 or 15 times between yesterday and today. I've listened to it previously, and I tend to agree with him. Something about this does not pass the smell test. When you think about the countries that are involved, the governments that are involved, the track record of these governments, and he does have a point that is, and look at for example, Barbados. See what Barbados is doing concurrently with this legislation is to go to Parliament to hasten the ability of persons to get access to voting in that country. So there seems to be something afoot. And in Dominica, for example, citizens from other countries can vote if they're there for 12 months. So it does appear to me that there is something to this. And we should not be deluded into thinking that this is just something to help improve the economies or to somehow stimulate growth or nothing of that. Because I honestly do not see how, given the limited number of countries involved, how that is anything but that sinister motive to invoke or to get as much votes as possible. And that seems to be the way. So I concur almost fully with what this gentleman had to say. We need
But
to
let me
keep our eyes open in this.
but let me ask you before I go to Mr. Dr. Harris, how are Dominicans responding to it? Is it that they've resigned themselves so well? I guess he's going to be in another, another what, 5 years, because your election is coming up in 2027, right?
Yes, that's correct. We still have 3 years, but there is a thinking that he may go for a snap election even
Yes.
before we are through with the reforms that went through Parliament this year. So that is something we have to look out for. But yeah, I can see how, especially now, because the thinking is that, and we were looking to see what strategies he would come up with, because in the past, we've had hundreds of people come in from the United States territories and the US mainland to come in to vote through charter aircraft. We were thinking that it would be a bit more challenging now, given the policies of the Trump administration and the close scrutiny under which these countries are now placed, given the CBI program. We were thinking that there would have been some restrictions as to how we would get these individuals in. So
Mm-hmm.
that could very well be the plan B that we're seeing at play there, to
Ah,
be able to
interesting.
overcome
Very
some of that.
interesting. To buy in the election. Didn't want to, So tell me, I mean, what do you want to say to Barbados? You are muted. You're muted, sir. Yes.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was saying that the behavior of our governments are questionable, because here we have four governments on a frolic of their own, making major decisions without having the courtesy of involvement of the people, or consulting the people on decisions that has implications for every single person in those regions. And that to me is worrisome, and the broader consequence of those actions, which appears to be self-serving, adds more worry to the whole equation. And I would just say to the Barbados people, to be conscious, or to be careful of leaders who, once they get entrenched, seem either unwilling or unable or not willing to let go of power. We had a similar situation here in Dominica, where we had even our prime minister, after 20 years, he promised that he would no longer contest, that he would be gone by April of this year. And instead, he has gone back on that promise. And I'm seeing a similar creeping situation in Barbados, where I believe that at some point there was some suggestions by the prime minister that she would limit her stay in office, but it appears that that has gone off the window.
Yes.
So I think that they're very worrisome trends that are evolving there. It happens that the same persons who were advising or consulting with the prime minister, the same political consultants are the ones in Barbados. So we need to be careful about that as well. So we are seeing basically a singing from similar hymn sheets by, in particular, the government of Barbados and that of Dominica. And I think that should be sending warning flags out to the people of Barbados. And but I have much confidence in the people of Barbados. They will not allow it to reach a state that it got to in Dominica, which now involves the conscious effort to jail the opposition and to silence the opposition. My hope is that the people of Barbados will stand resolutely against this.